during an online meeting, it's important to make sure others can see you. To ensure that happens, work in a well-lit room and avoid having any lights point directly at your camera. Treat it like any other meeting. Online meetings may be awkward at times, but behaving as you normally would in person will make it less so. Dress, speak, and behave like you would during any other meeting, and you'll be just fine. If you wouldn't do it during an in-person meeting, don't do it in an online one. Follow these tips and you'll be contributing to successful online meetings in no time.
Okay, baik. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Dan salam sejahtera. Welcome everyone. Selamat datang. Apa khabar semua? Baik. So first of all, thank you very much for joining our second training session by KAIS for this year. And my name is Karo Anwar bin Ibrahim. I'll be your moderator and your host today from Center of Academic Excellence and Scholarship. Untuk memberkati majlisnya, kita mulakan dengan ulum kitab Al-Fatihah. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Okay, before we start, let's begin with a little bit housekeeping. So for those who just joined us, welcome again, and please sign your attendance in the link given below in the chat box. Okay, so and then please mute your microphone to avoid any distraction. If you have any question during the presentation, feel free to write it in the chat box below. Preferably if you can start in the collected queue so we know that there's a question. I will bring them up. Me also, if PM Dr. Mariam here, will co-host and moderate this session for you. Okay, this session will be broken into three parts. I think Dr. Idaria and I will introduce you the trainer after this, together with Puan Mitra from UTM. Also, the recorded version of this webinar will be available in our Facebook, YouTube, and also our KAIS website, as well as the slide presentation later on. So please enjoy, pay close attention. I hope you will benefit from this session. So before we begin, let me welcome Dr. Yutaria. Are you here? And Puan Mitra. Assalamualaikum, Dr. Yutaria.
Yes, Waalaikumsalam.
Okay, baik. Terima kasih. First of all, thank you very much for coming. And also, we are very fortunate here to have one of a great speaker on course assessment on engineering education, all the way from our close friend in UTM. And we've assisted by Puan Mitra, also from UTM. So before we begin, let me introduce you to Dr. Yudaria. For those, maybe some of you who graduated from UTM before might know her, teaching mathematics class. Okay, so she is a former, Dr. Yudaria Muhammad Yusof is a former associate professor at the Department of Mathematical Science, UTM. She received a master's in mathematics from University of Leeds, UK, and PhD from University of Warwick, UK. She is currently attached with the Center of Engineering Education and largely engaged in work related to enhancing engineering education. Her focus basically interests include the mathematical education of prospective engineer and teachers, teaching and learning strategies, and assessment of learning.
Tak dengar. I can't hear you.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Yuda, maybe you can check your mic. How about the rest of the participants? Can you all hear me?
I can hear you, Dr. KA.
Yeah?
I can hear you.
Okay, very good. Okay. So Dr. Yuda, maybe you want to check your microphone, your speaker, perhaps. If you are using maybe in WebEx, you have to check under the audio and video settings. Okay. All right. Can you hear me, Dr. Yuda? I think just now we tested some more. Okay, I think. All right. So may I continue while Dr. Yuda is focusing on her. So basically, she has researched and written and published in areas such as mathematical thinking, integration of technology, mathematical competency, and mathematics at workplace. Over the years, she has been actively involved in conducting various workshops and mathematical thinking, active learning, OBE, and assessment for student learning. So we are very fortunate to have this very experienced person to be in here with us. And we also have welcome to you Puan Mitra Muhammad Adi. She's basically a PhD candidate in biomedical engineering from University of New South Wales, Australia. She did her master in bioengineering from University of Strathclyde, Scotland, and then she was getting bachelor from UTP. So basically, she's now a lecturer. She will be assisting Dr. Yuda. So Dr. Yuda, yeah, I can see your face. Can you hear our voice? Dr. Yuda? Okay, back to Puan Mitra. She began her career in 2003. She is basically a lecturer in electrical School of Electrical Engineering in UTM. Okay. She will assist us. She has been associated with Society of Engineering Education Malaysia since 2011 and very actively in SEEN. Yes, Saya? Hello, Dr. Yuda. Can you hear me? I think just now we did. Take it.
Dr. Khairul, I cannot hear you saying anything.
Okay, because Dr. Mariam can hear me, but Mitra boleh dengar tak?
Boleh?
Boleh. Puan Mitra boleh dengar? Sekejap sebentar.
Tak dengar voice.
Tak dengar voice, okay. Puan Yuda boleh go to your audio setting. Maybe your speaker you pakai desktop atau laptop. Saya pun dah tak dengar dah suara. Hello.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam, Dr. Yuda. Dr. Yuda, kami dengar.
Dr. Yuda, boleh dengar? Boleh dengar?
Tak dengar.
Tak dengar.
Hear anything.
Dr. KA,
Yeah.
can you just give me Dr. Yuda punya phone? I contact dia.
Okay, boleh. Boleh kejap Dr. Yuda punya phone kejap.
Is the sound system okay?
Okay, saya boleh dengar suara Dr. Yuda clear and crystal clear.
I cannot hear anything from you.
Okay, Dr. Yuda, can please hold on. Nanti someone will call you.
Yeah, hello. Yeah.
Dr. KA, can you just talk a bit so that for testing?
Okay, Assalamualaikum, testing 1, 2, 3. Dr. Yuda boleh dengar? Okay, to all participants, so we would like to apologize for this small technical problem. So please stay tuned. Kita akan come back to you once we connect our voice with Dr. Yuda. Dr. Yudaria. Dr. Yudaria, can you hear us?
Volume dah 100%.
Boleh dah? Okay, Dr. Yuda, are you ready?
Okay. Very soft.
Very soft. Okay, Dr. Yuda, maybe you want to increase your volume in your speaker.
What talking about?
Hello, yes, saya.
Okay, right. Mitra, are you okay? Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear. Can you hear me tak?
Kenapa tak
Can
boleh
you
dengar?
hear me? I can hear
Yes,
you.
we can hear you. We can hear you. Sorry, I was talking to Dr. EKA just now to increase his volume lah. So from his side, maybe the setting from his volume is a bit soft. But Dr. Yuda, can you hear my voice clearly? Dr. Yudaria?
Mungkin boleh minta dia keluar dan masuk balik. Cubalah.
Okay, saya apa dulu ya? Log out balik I'll leave meeting, then I'll come back.
Okay. Dr. KA, can you just speak a bit so that, because just now it was a bit soft. Maybe you can talk a bit louder.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Right.
Okay, baik. Okay, so to all participants, so thank you very much. So sorry for and thank you very much for being patient with us today. So kita akan sambung basically our training session while waiting for your Dr. Yudaria to set up her problem. Let me introduce again to her. So we have two speakers here. One is Dr. Yudaria Yusuf, a former associate professor. So basically, she's a retiree from UTM. She will be presenting us this seminar today. She graduated for Master from Mathematics from Leeds and PhD from University of Warwick, UK. Okay, so can you all hear me? Can you type something on the chat box? If you are not very clear, please let us know in the chat box. Okay.
Okay, I can hear very, but I will try as we go on. Hopefully, the system will be okay.
Okay. Okay,
baik.
Now, without further ado, I think it's already 2:15. We would like to pass over our session here to Dr. Yudaria. So, without further ado, is it okay? Over to you, Dr. Yudaria. You can start sharing your slides as well, introduce yourself and proceed with the training. Thank you very much.
Okay, so basically I'm going to break the session into 3. Okay, so we have session 1. Also, that's me, Yudaria, and together with me is Mitra. So this is basically the expectation, the learning outcomes for the workshop. So hopefully by the end of the session, you can explain the difference between testing, assessment, and evaluation in OBE system, able to distinguish between the 3 domains of learning, as well as you can use the revised Bloom taxonomy to create test items. So this is the agenda for this afternoon. So we have 3 sessions. So the first session, I will start with an overview of assessment in OBE. In session 2, we're going to look at the RBT or the revised Bloom taxonomy in detail. And the last part will be looking at using the RBT to create test items. So first we're going to start with an activity. So can you please go to menti.com and then use the code 30459631. So I'm going to stop sharing because Mitra will show with the menti.com to you. So just take note, go to menti.com, okay, and then use the code 30459631. Okay, Mitra?
Dr. Yudaria, do you have, can you switch on your video if you have video cam?
Mitra, the content is not shown on the screen.
Dr. Yuda, is it possible if you could switch on your video so we could see maybe your face here in WebEx? Is it possible? Like we just did just now lah. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Now, is the menti.com on? Okay, I cannot see the content.
We can see it now.
Okay, right. Okay, so that's the question. What is the purpose of giving assessment? So you have about 50 seconds to give your response. Okay, 19 seconds more to go. Only 29 participants so far have responded. Okay, once the time's up, you are no longer able to give your response. Okay, voting is closed. Mitra, can you show the results? Right, so that's what the participants have responded to. What's the purpose of giving assessment, testing, grading, assessing understanding, evaluate, measure the level of understanding, assess LO of the subject, analyze and to collect information. So basically, based on the answer, okay, so most of you understood Okay, the purpose of giving assessment. So some is formative, some is summative. All right. Mitra, can we go for the next question? Okay, now what are you measuring? Okay, using the same code 30459631. Okay, so you have about 30 seconds left. Okay, so what are you measuring? You have carried out an assessment. So what is it that you are measuring? Okay, so we have about 31 participants answering so far who managed to respond to the questions. So can we show the results? Okay, the PLO and CLO, the level of understanding, how much students have gained, student understanding, learning outcomes, okay, measuring the student's depth. Okay, it's cognitive psychomotor assessment. Right. Students' ability. Okay, so some managed to get it accurate, so some almost there. Okay, so thank you for the response. So, Mitra can stop sharing that. All right, so actually the two questions that I had posed earlier are the most important questions when you want to do assessment. Okay, so that actually will influence the kind of assessment that you are doing or you are involved in. Okay, so let's go back to the slide. Okay, so we have done that. So this in the first half an hour. So I'm going to share with you just a brief overview of assessment in OBE. Okay, so just to recap or just to refresh everyone's memory, what matters most in OBE is student learning, and assessment is therefore the focus on students' learning outcomes. Okay, so you have seen this. This is the integrated course design. Okay, where when we want to implement our course, we have to make sure that all these three elements, the learning outcomes, assessment, instruction, are in place. Okay, because the learning outcomes is actually the one that we need to think about clearly, because it will influence why we want to do assessment as well as what we want to assess. Okay, so there are three domains there: the cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. Okay, and the next thing that we need to think about after the learning outcomes is the assessment. Okay, how are we going to get the evidence? Okay, and the last stage is the instruction. Okay, how are we going to prepare the students to meet the outcomes? Okay, so these are the three domains. So you can see that they are actually overlapping, but our mission, okay, is actually to produce holistic graduates. Okay, so focusing on the knowledge on the cognitive domain is just part of the equation. Okay, what we want is actually, okay, for future ready graduates, the one that why we implement OBE in the first place is that we want students or the graduates to possess all the three elements. Okay, we want them to have the depth and breadth of the knowledge. We want them to have the strategies, the skills, okay, the ability to learn independently, to interact in the world in a variety of contexts, as well as the right mindset. Okay, so as a human being, we don't function in silos. We don't say that we are now doing thinking, or we are now doing psychomotor, or we are now doing we are not in the affective domain. Okay? It's all overlap. It's all integrated. Okay? It's just a matter of when we do assessment, which one we want to focus on. Are we going to assess on the knowledge? Are we going to assess on the psychomotor, or are we going to assess the affective? But in terms of the development, it is all integrated. Okay, so when we do assessment in OBE, first we have to make sure that the outcomes are well formulated, and then the methods of assessment is accurate. That means we have choose the correct methods that is aligned to the outcomes in assessing the evidence. And of course, the course activities, the teaching activities, the learning activities must prepare the students for meeting the outcomes. That's what we said, that it must be constructively aligned. Okay, so now we're going to go to again to the Mentimeter just to test your understanding on how do you decide on the methods of assessment and how do you prepare the students to achieve the learning outcomes. Okay, so for this, you need to use the code 99393424. Okay, so please go to menti.com again, okay, and reflect on your own practice, because I'm sure that everybody have been involved in assessment practice for at least several years in your career. So what is it? Okay, what factors, or how do you decide on the methods of assessment, and how do you prepare students to achieve the learning outcomes? I'm going to stop sharing and let Mitra show the menti.com. Okay, how do you decide on the methods of assessment you use? Okay, you have to be a little bit quick, because we have set a timer to 1 minute. So far only 13 participants have responded. Just use your handphone. Go to menti.com and then use the code 99393424. Okay, so we have about 21 participants who responded to this question. So Mitra, can you show the results? How do you decide on the methods of assessment? Okay, so you use rubric, depends on the CLO. Okay, depending on the content and objective, right? You move further up, based on the learning outcomes. Okay, comfortable for me and students. Wow, that's very subjective. Okay, so based on the LO. Okay, so that's actually the correct answer. Okay, how do you decide on the method of assessment is based on the learning outcomes. Okay, so in OBE, learning outcomes play a very important role. Whatever you decide, whatever you want to do in your course, it all depends on the learning outcomes. Okay, and the second question. Okay, how do you prepare students to achieve the CLO? Okay, so you have decided the methods is actually based on the learning outcomes. Now, how about the preparation, the course activities, the teaching learning activities? Okay, so only 5 participants so far. You set the timer, Mitra? Okay, so we give you 1 minute. All right, so we have more participants now. Okay, you have about 30 seconds or less to submit your response. How do you prepare students to achieve the course learning outcomes? Remember, you have already set the outcomes. You have already chosen the assessment methods. Now, how about the preparation? How about the teaching learning activities? Okay, so time's up. So only 29 participants so far have managed. Right, so that's what some of you have responded. Design appropriate instruction. You give tutorial, class discussion based on the syllabus. Okay, face-to-face classroom. Okay, the quiz assignment. Okay, so I presume that this is the assessment methods as well as the teaching learning activities. Based on students' learning, time based on the course syllabus, and so on. Okay, constructive alignment examples, practices. What is the goal? Okay, so I think some of you have the idea on how to prepare the students. Right, can you stop sharing, Mitra? Right, so I'm going to continue with the PowerPoint. Okay. So we have done that. Right, so I'm going to introduce to you a framework which I find very useful. Okay, it's called Miller's Pyramid. Actually, it has gone several evolution for this pyramid. It started off with just the triangle, the one with the color-coded levels. Okay, and more researchers have added the 3D dimension, which is the triangle with the knowledge, skills, attitudes that was actually added on by recent studies by other researchers. So what this framework show, it incorporates all the important things that we do about in the course, which is the learning. Okay. As you can see, there's cognition and behavior. That's actually our learning outcomes, which is based on the 3 domains. So the knowledge and the behavior constitute the psychomotor and affective. And the pyramid, the color-coded, shows the levels of learning taking place, and the attitude, skills, knowledge are the what we assess. Okay, and the levels of development, okay, which is the progressive development across the range of abilities, is from novice to expert. Okay, so if you look at this framework, okay, so if you are just concentrating at the bottommost level, okay, the bottommost level is really concentrating on the cognition, the subject matter. Okay, knowing, meaning that it is really concentrating on the facts, the rules, the theories about the discipline. Okay, so at this stage, okay, according to Miller, according to the researchers after him, the students are actually at the novice stage. Okay, in terms of the skills development, novice stage. So at the second level, okay, knows how means the students are able to not only know about the subject matter, the content of the subject matter, but also know how to use, okay, to reason and to solve problems, but still within the cognition domain. Okay, so you can see that on the leftmost is still within the cognition domain. So at this stage, the students are considered competent. Okay, so they know the knowledge, they know how to apply the knowledge within a controlled environment, within the discipline. Okay? If you look at the assessment there through case presentation, essays, projects, and so on. So it's still within the cognitive domain. Okay. And at this stage, the students are considered competent. Okay. Now remember the holistic graduates that we want to produce. So we have to bring the students to the third and fourth level, because that's where the cognitive and the affective, the psychomotor and the affective domain are being activated. Okay. So when the students are at the third level, this shows how. That means hands-on. Okay. When the students are able to demonstrate, okay, what they can do with the knowledge that they have. Okay. So at this stage, the students are considered proficient, okay, in terms of the skills development. Okay. But in order for them to function, okay, as a professional in the subject matter, because remember that this is at the course level, so we are not yet talking about students graduating from the program. This is actually at the course level. So we must bring the students at least to the top level, because that's where the affective domain is activated. That means at this stage, the students are able to integrate the intellectual skills that is from the knowledge, as well as the psychomotor skills, that means the performance, able to show, able to demonstrate what they can do with the knowledge. And when they reach the top level, that means they have acquired, okay, the mindset. Okay, they have already acquired the mindset. That means they can act, okay, or function as an expert, okay, in the subject matter. Okay, so think about when you give your students an A. What does A constitute? What does A means? Okay. So this is where the student should be. For the expert is actually the grade A students. Okay, that means the student can show, okay, they have managed to acquire not only the knowledge, but also what to do with the knowledge and the beliefs and attitudes, okay, related or associated with the knowledge, the mindset, the personal characteristic, the emotional growth, okay, it's related to the discipline. Okay. So if you are only focusing on the low level, that means the students are not yet proficient or expert. Okay. So this is where you can actually see, you can see the discrimination. You can able to differentiate between the A students, the B students, the C students, and the poor students. Okay. So the poor students will stay at the bottom. Okay, they will remain novice. That means they may have the knowledge, but they don't know what to do with the knowledge. They were not able to show, okay, not able to perform, not able to use the knowledge to solve real problems. Okay, and they don't have the belief or attitudes. Okay, so that's what it means here. Right. So the guiding questions for doing assessment, okay, at course level. Okay, these are some of the questions. So what are you trying to find about your students? What learning outcomes do you want to measure? What kind of evidence do you need, okay, to show that the students have achieved the outcomes? And what kind of assessment will give us the evidence? Okay, so these are some terms that we have to make sure, although the terms, okay, we tend to use it interchangeably, okay, but in educational setting, it means something specific. Okay, so testing is the way to make measurement. Okay, measurement is what you're looking for. Think about measure. When we say we want to measure our height, we want to measure our weight and so on. So it's an act of quantifying. And assessment is how are you going to look for it? Okay? What methods are you going to use? Okay, so this is an act of classification. Okay, and evaluation is the act of passing judgment. So if you are going to look at it as a whole, okay, this is how it is related. Okay, so we measure skills or knowledge, and then we test the measurement, we assess learning, we evaluate result in terms of some sets of criteria or standards. So if we want to relate it with what we are doing, so evaluation is actually what we do at the end of the course, like the CQI and so on. So that's actually evaluation. That means once you get the evidence, so what are you going to do with the evidence? Okay, how are you going to present the evidence? How are you going to communicate the evidence? Okay, so that will go into the evaluation. Right, so there are the assessment terminology. Okay, sometimes we say assessment types, assessment methods, assessment tools, assessment tasks. Okay, so these are all some specific terminology widely used or commonly used in assessment area. So the types refers to whether it's formative, summative, whether it's non-reference, criterion reference, and so on. And the methods like written work, practical, so those are all assessment methods. Tools are more specific. Okay, once you have actually choose the method, say written work, okay, then you need to create the instrument as well as the instruction. So that will give us the tools. This is how everything is related. So you have the assessment method, the strategies and techniques for collecting evidence, and then the tools will consist of the instrument and the procedures, and the assessment task refers to the activities that student undertake. Like for example, your method is written work, right? So your instrument will be say an essay. So the task will be the question. Okay, the essay question is going to be the task. And the assessor guidelines will be the rubric or some kind of marking scheme that you have prepared. Right, so this diagram sort of like summarize the taxonomy of approaches to assessment. So when you say taxonomy approaches, there are actually levels of assessment. Okay, so are you going to assess the CLO? Are you going to assess the PLO? Or are you going to assess the PEO? Okay, so the levels of assessment or the purpose of assessment or what to assess, these are all the three questions that will influence the kind of assessment efforts that we are going to involve in. Okay, so what to assess basically are the learning outcomes. Okay, the cognitive, psychomotor, affective. The three domains that we have chosen. Okay, and then the purpose is either formative or summative. Okay, are you going to give grading? Or is it going for certification or is it just for feedback? Okay, and who to assess? Okay, is it individual students or the cohort of students? So answering these questions will indicate the efforts or the activities of assessment we are involved in. So for example, if you look at cell 1, which is on the upper left, okay, so the purpose is formative and you are going to assess individual students. Okay, so it's because it's formative, so the assessment is just for the purpose of improvement. Okay, that means you want to have feedback from the students, individual students, to help them to improve, to give feedback, and also to place them in the class. Okay, and if you go look at the bottom, the second cell, the lower left. Okay, now the individual results are aggregated to inform about the performance of the class. Okay, so that will inform us as the lecturer and inform the students on improvement. Okay, still the purpose is formative. Okay, so and then if we go to the next two cells, that is the summative, which is the accountability. So the purpose is for accreditation or to certify qualified students. Okay, and then the results of assessment that we had gathered, either is formative or summative, are being prepared to get some statistics for evaluation. Okay, that's when that's the lower left cell. The lower right cell. Okay, whether this is where we prepare where we do the CQI or we prepare the cost review reports and so on. Okay, so that is for the summative. That is where the evaluation taking place. Okay, so basically assessment is an outcome-driven process. Okay, so it focuses on measuring changes based on the course activities that we had prepared, and the results are used to support future change and improvement. It can be for learning, can be for certification, it can be for accreditation or quality assurance, and it also can be used to inform policy or decision making in a much more broader context, like environmental, economics, and also social. So that's why we say it can also be used for sustainability. And the purpose is that we must have a balanced assessment. Okay? So we are not going to just use concentrate on summative or formative. We need both. Okay? So remember that formative and summative are not methods of assessment. They are referring to the function, okay, the function of assessment that we give, right? So for formative is mainly as a feedback, okay, for improvement. So it can be a feedback to the lecturer, okay, to inform the teaching, to see the effectiveness of the lesson or the course, and feedback to the students to track the progress. Okay, and summative is basically for certification, for grading. Okay, but sometimes summative data can also be used as formative. Okay, for example, we give quizzes or mid-term tests, mid-semester tests, okay, which the purpose is actually for grading. But then when we do the marking, we found that there's some weaknesses or some errors that we don't want students to repeat in the final, for example. So we are giving the students feedback on this. Okay? Although the assessment was actually for grading, okay? But then when we do the marking, there is still room for improvement for the students. So now it serves also as a formative purpose. So sometimes it can be both. Okay? So as I mentioned just now, the formative summative is not referring to the methods, it's actually referring to the functions of the assessment. Okay, now what to assess are all these three domains. So we have the cognitive, the psychomotor, and affective. Now each of these three domains require different methods. Okay, so no one method fits all. Okay. So you can see the focus of each of the domain is different, right? And but as I mentioned just now, okay, all these three domains in practice they are all interrelated. Okay, it's just a matter of what you want to assess. Okay. And when we carry out the course, we should not be only focusing on one particular domain because that will defeat the purpose of OBE. Okay, because OBE means we want to produce holistic graduates. Okay, and we have already decided, okay, at the very beginning that we are going to use the three domains. Okay, so if you put all these three domains together, you can see that the levels of the hierarchy, there are some similarities in terms of the complexity. Okay, so if you see the words or the action verbs for each of the domain, okay, so the highest level for each domain, okay, is requiring students to design, to construct, you know. So in terms of the psychomotor means the students have managed, okay, to gain the skills or the ability to perform, okay, or to do something and can now create new ideas or new strategies, okay, or new techniques. Okay. So if you look at the cognitive, the highest level, this is actually the old Bloom. So the new Bloom, actually the synthesis is at the top. Okay, the synthesis of create, okay, in the new Bloom. So also referring to creating, okay, new ideas or proposing something new. Okay, and for the effective as well, if you look at the highest level, okay, is if you look at the terms, okay, or the verbs used, assess, delegate, so still is a higher order, okay, of the learning levels. Okay. So the domains actually inform and guide the writing of outcomes as well as the subsequent assessment strategy. So as some of you noted, when we want to choose assessment methods, we always refer back to the outcomes. What does the outcome say? Okay. So these are examples of CLO in the three domains, okay, referring to the same, I've chosen the same example. Okay. This is about manufacturing process of a food product. So how do you write the outcomes reflect, okay, the domain, okay, the outcomes is categorized. For example, appraise the manufacturing process in developing new food product, so it will be cognitive. When you say formulate a new food product that meets certain standards of quality, that will be psychomotor because the expectation is that students will need to go to the lab, you know, to carry out some experiment or something, okay, to formulate the product. And affective is on the mindset, you know. The student can see that this new food product is good, okay, and they would like to promote the product by making brochures or presenting poster or something like that. Right? So that will be in the affective domain. Right? So you can see that the adoption of learning outcomes is more than just simply expressing what we want students to learn. It also have implication on the design of the course, on our delivery, expression, how you express the learning, the kind of learning being promoted, and the assessment as well as the quality, the standard that you want students to achieve at the end of the course. So this is how the constructively aligned course should be. So you have the learning outcomes, then it will inform you about the methods and then the timing, when you want to give, the criteria as well as the feedback. And all this must happen within active engagement. Now, but studies have shown that the principles of effective assessment is also the common weaknesses. Where they found that there's a very weak linkages between the outcomes and the assessment, the criteria, the marking procedures, and the feedback. Okay, so these are some studies that they have found. So based on the outcome, it says able to solve demanding problems, but when they look at the exam paper, the question are just reproducing word for word, symbols for symbol in the PowerPoint notes. And the second outcome say formulate critical judgment and analysis. Again, the assessment is just rewarding in lectures and recommended reading. Okay, so it's just a reproduction. So the question is, where is the critical judgment or whatever we want students to have? So choosing the right assessment plays a very important role because we are actually accountable. Remember, we are accountable for giving the grades to the students. When we say the student have passed our course, they have obtained a grade A, that means they are expert. Okay. But sometimes, because of the way we assess the students is inaccurate, so the results that we are actually informing the other stakeholders are actually not effective. Okay. So we have to be very careful with the assessment because we are responsible for the grades or the results that students obtain. Okay, so you can see that the measurement, what we are measuring are all internal aspects. The knowledge, skills, values, they are all internal. Okay, they are not something that that we can see. Is something that is discrete. So we have to make inference. Okay, so how do we choose the right assessment? Depends on the outcomes that we had set. As I mentioned just now, no one single fits all. So we're going to go to this activity. This activity is in Jamboard. Is it, Mitra? Jamboard or... Okay, so we will quickly...
Yes. It's in Jamboard. I'll share the link.
Okay, so I'm going to... Can we reserve this one first? Because there's another activity also in Jamboard, just to save time because we have just now missed quite a few minutes at the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to continue and we're going to go to the Jamboard together with the last activity. Okay, so keep this activity in mind because this is the one that you're going to this is just actually a matching, the learning outcomes on the left and the assessment on the right. See, just you test your what you know in terms of the linking between the assessment and outcomes. Okay, so you can have the learning outcomes there from all the three domains and the various teaching and learning activities that will prepare the students to meet the outcomes, and we have the assessment methods on the right. So we can have written exam, we can have practical assessment as well as the personal communication like self-reflection and so on. Okay, so although we are grading the task, in essence, what we should grade are the learning outcomes. Remember just now we asked the question, what are you measuring? Okay, so basically what we are measuring is the learning outcomes. Okay, so we are not measuring how well the students do in the assessment task. Assessment tasks are just methods that we use to gather evidence that inform us on the achievement of learning outcomes. Okay, so the purpose is actually measuring the learning outcomes. That's why just now when we see the 3D matrix, okay, what the objects of assessment or what to assess are actually the learning outcomes, which comprise of the 3 domains. Okay, now we're going to look at how you're going to link the outcomes and also the criteria. You remember in part 2 of this workshop, we're going to look at the rubrics. Okay, but how do we create the rubrics in the first place actually is informed by the learning outcomes. Okay, so we're going to learn how to analyze the learning outcomes, okay, and extract, okay, the quality or the performance attributes, okay, or the success criteria. Okay. So look at the verb. Okay, look at the verb that you had used in the outcomes. Okay, because what we assess basically is the action, okay, which is activated by the verb. Okay, so these are some examples. Okay, so for example, you have in your learning outcomes. So I chose 2 examples here. Okay, you have the verb that's explain, say explain, able to explain, say Bloom taxonomy. Okay, so you have the verb there, explain. So what you are looking for, okay, this is on your perspective. I am looking for. Okay, what is it that you're looking for is explain. Okay, now what is your expectation? How do you describe the verb explain? Okay, so your expectation is that explain concept or scenario or whatever that you have, the condition that you have put in the outcomes. Okay, now to be successful, what do students need to do? Okay, this is where you can actually make explicit, okay, the criteria or the success, what we call the performance expectation. Okay, so this is where you need to describe what is it you expect the students to be able to do. Okay, that tells you the learning outcomes has been achieved. Okay, for example here I say evaluate concepts. So that means the verb explain here is not in the level 2 of the taxonomy. Okay, because my what I want students to do is to evaluate. So that means the explain here is in the 5th level of the taxonomy. Because also sometimes when you look at the verbs, you know, in the taxonomy, you can have some terms appearing at 2 or 3 different levels. Okay, so when you say evaluate, that means that's what you want students to display or to show to you. Okay? Able to evaluate the concept with clarity, reasoning, okay, with examples. Okay? Now you can see clearly that when you mark or when you create your rubric or when you do the marking, these are the things that you're going to look at. These are the things that the students will earn marks. Okay, so the next example is illustrate. Okay, so illustrate is actually at the, I think, also high level. It can be at the 4th or the 5th level. Okay. But looking at the description there, I think it's at the 4th level because you want the explanation. Okay, so the illustration is also involve explanation, but you want explanation to be illustrated with examples, charts, and diagrams. Okay, so that's your expectation. So what you want students to be able to show to you is exactly the same thing. Okay, so when you give tasks, okay, either the teaching learning activities or the assessment tasks, these are the things that you're going to look at in the students' work. That means the illustrations must be clear, must be accurate, must be relevant, enhance the text with examples, charts, diagrams, and reference accurately. So once you put reference accurately there, that means this is not just simply cognitive. So you must have other methods as well besides written exams. Okay, because the student have need to go to the library or to search the internet, do some extra reading for them to get the reference. Okay, that will involve psychomotor. Okay, so you can see that these prompts, the 3 prompts here, helps you to clarify the criteria and share with the students. Okay, so at the beginning, you don't need to share the rubric. Okay, what is important is for you to share your expectation and what you expect students to do for them to succeed in the course or in the outcomes. Right. So now we're going to go to the Jamboard. So we're going to do 2 activities, the one with the matching as well as this one here. So consider your own course. Okay. Maybe you can just take one outcome, analyze the outcome, and think about what is being learned. Okay, remember the Miller's pyramid. Okay, so what is it that you want students? What knowledge or skills or ability that you want students to achieve at the end of the course? Okay, and how will students know they have learned? Okay, so can we give 20 minutes? Is that okay, Dr. Khairul? 20 minutes for the Jamboard. Okay, so we have 2 activities.
Yeah.
So I think we already prepare the breakout rooms for you. So just go to the Jamboard and based on your faculty or on your area of study, you can join the room. So we have prepared one room, at least 10 people, so that you can do some discussion and maybe brainstorming within you, and come up with some response. Okay, so can we go
Boleh,
20 minutes
sure.
at the Jamboard?
I have activated the breakout session, so you can
Okay.
join
So
the
I'm going to
breakout
start
session according to the course that you are in. And the Jamboard link is available in the chat for activity 1, and another link is for activity 2. And you can find the frame at which we have labeled according to your course.
So I can share the Jamboard here. Okay, so 20 minutes everyone to look at the activity.
Okay. So to all participants, so you are going to split into several groups according to your faculties. Dr. Mitra has also split the group into so you choose which faculty are you from. Certain faculty, perhaps there are one or two groups, so you can join one group. So if the other group is more than 10%, you can join the other group lah, in the same faculty. Okay, so Dr. Mitra dah activate ke
You can share the Jamboard here.
Yeah,
You
I can see is the crowd number in the main session has already been dispersed. Okay, very good. So
I have shared the Jamboard link for activity 1 and another link for activity 2. So you can look at the
so just 20 minutes. Okay, we have to limit the time because we have more activities.
So to all participants, please join. Dia punya.
All participants just in the first example in the breakout session there under participant. I would suggest that if you are under FKE, FKTK or FTKE, you can go to fill in first the first row. You see there's a number, right? So 2/0. So you fill in the first row first. Don't go and go to the last group. There will be nobody inside. So please go and enter at the first room first, and then for the next room lah if it's full, right? So let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so please kindly actively participate in the activity. Okay, so in order to make this session will be much fruitful and interactive. All right, so okay, so we have now around 120 participants, Dr. Yuda.
So one more than 10 people in.
Yeah, perhaps not. But it's okay. I think it's okay, and alhamdulillah lah, we got a big crowd here. That's the advantage of having a webinar session like this. Okay, so we'll see in about 15-20 minutes, right? Okay. So now everybody have been broken out. So for the rest of I think if I speak up, the rest of the session cannot hear, right? Can they hear me?
Oh, they cannot hear you.
They can. Oh, okay, all right.
Tapi now I think the footage is better. At the very beginning tadi memang tak dengar lah apa yang Dr. Khairul cakap.
Yalah. Okay, so now I can see participant masih lagi dalam senarai ini. Sekejap. Dia dah move ke semua participant ni?
Maksudnya kalau dia masuk dekat room, they shouldn't be in the main.
Okay, to the participant, can we have some feedback whether you have did you receive the invitation untuk breakout rooms? Tak dapat. Can you send a message
Sometimes they just left the computer and use another device
Okay.
to go to.
For all participants, you can see on the top right of your screen, there is a message there. Dia kata breakout sessions have started. You can join any session. So you need to click on the show all breakout session link. Okay. So you click on there and you join.
They have to accept the invitation.
You accept invitation, and then after that you click on show which breakout room. If you don't have, like myself, I don't think I received that invitation. So on the top right of your WebEx, you should see a message lah. Show all breakout session. You click on that blue font text, and then they will show you breakout session, and you can click on join which breakout session that you are into. Okay, can you please do it quickly so that we can, because the time is ticking. Now it's 3.
Dah. Saya dah pergi kat Jamboard ni.
Semua orang boleh buka kan?
Boleh. Match the assessment to the learning outcome.
Saya punya view on.
Nak kena buat apa ni? Match match learning outcome dengan assessment.
Saya rasa kita buatlah untuk semua FTMK ni sebab ada satu grup je pun FTMK.
Okey.
Macam
Kita buat sama-sama lah. Kita buat sama-sama.
Buat sama-sama.
Okay, match. The first learning outcome. Pengusi OBE lah expert.
Kita suruh pengusi buat.
Dia kita tanya orang lain yang buat. Okay, learning outcome cooperatively collaborate with group members. So kat sini ada group, ada corporate.
Satu dengan D kan?
That one is D.
Satu dengan D.
I think we have 17.
D.
Boleh masuk room yang satu.
Dua formulate.
Saya tak boleh edit ni. Macam mana kita nak tulis jawapan ni? Somebody boleh
Semua dapat
view only.
Tapi boleh select tu apa lagi?
Dr. Nafazila dah type dekat situ. Okey.
Cik Razak dah siap lah.
Boleh request edit access.
Tak apalah. Ada dekat chatbox tu.
Seorang cukup lah.
Okay. 1D, 2C kan? 2C formulate new product.
Lab-based project.
Okay, lab-based project. Tapi nombor 4 ni select appropriate test to diagnose and
bukan C ke? Nombor 4.
Saya macam
select
3B, yes. 3B kan? Proposal kan, research, word. Cuma 2 dengan 4 ni. Macam mana kawan-kawan?
Saya rasa 4C. Tak tahulah orang lain.
4C. Select appropriate test.
Okay. And then C, lab-based project. Maybe yes. Okay. So, and D, make a presentation to the peers. So, I think I punya jawapan C and D lah. So, ada sini D, ada yang C. So, ada yang jawab C and D. Okay. Okay. Right. So, next. Macam mana ni? Saya tak gerti dah nak guna Jamboard. Okay, anyway, nombor 2 tu, learning outcome nombor 2. Okay. Formulate a new food product. So assessment dia, LO nombor 2 tu, apa assessment dia? Okay, Dr. Raifah C. Azlan C. So food product kan, so dia nak come up dengan new food product. So jawapan dia yang jawab di we take A and B. Multiple choice question. Nuriana B. Prepare 1000 word. C. Lab-based project. Okay. Saya tak tahu siapa yang conteng Okay, tak apa. And then nombor 4. Select appropriate test to diagnose engine failure. So this one is, nombor 3 Identify an area for research. So which one? B lah. Okay, nombor 3 tu I think clear lah. Nombor 3 tu dia punya assessment adalah B. Okay. Nombor 4. Select appropriate test, LO4 select appropriate test to diagnose engine failure. So what do you think is the answer? Appropriate test to diagnose engine failure. So I would say selection. Okay. Nombor 4, C, lab-based project. Ini C, Raifah C. So I would say, sebab kita nak select kan, so lab-based project lah. Kena buat. So that one will be the first task on the Jamboard tadi. Kita sempat tak ni nak buat yang second one Sekejap. Yang second one. Okay, yang second one Jamboard Consider a course you are currently teaching. Analyze the learning outcome and think about what is being learned. How will students know they have learned? Okay, this one I think the same thing that Dr. Yudaria discussed just now. Okay, so I think kalau each of you, I think everybody can actually click on the link too. So you guys just go to the chat tadi. I ada share yang link tadi kan, Jamboard tadi. So you click on the second activity tu. Okay. So click on there. Okay. Saya rasa everybody can enter there. And then you can actually type. Boleh type kat sini lah. Okay, so can we do that? Mungkin you guys boleh pilih yang first column tu, seorang boleh pilih first column, second column, another staff, third column, another staff, fourth column, another staff. Okay, paling senang buka lah you punya teaching plan So you have all of us, kita ada teaching plan sendiri. So kita try do that.
Dia dah ada jawapan kot. Copy paste je lah.
Copy paste
Boleh je lah.
Saya punya word ni tengah loading ni.
Saya ada bagi satu.
Tu.
Tapi saya tak boleh tulis. Tak boleh tulis. View only.
Ya, saya cuba.
Boleh
Copy paste lah. Siapa yang boleh tulis tu copy and paste.
Dekat chat tu.
Mana nak copy paste? boleh copy paste daripada ni, kena tulis balik tu ada somebody.
Explain the concept. And the principle
Kena pakai sticky note
ni the piece ni.
Saya punya ada satu. Sticky note. Okay. CLO3 saya. Orange, save.
Dah ramai dah ni, dah 35 orang, 40 orang. Dah ada 40 orang.
Semua dah ada. Kena habis masa-masa.
Macam mana tengok 40 orang saya nampak 19 je.
Kat atas yang ada gambar-gambar haiwan tu.
Okey. Dia dah fakulti lain.
Bila pergi dekat number 35 tu, dia bagi tahu 40 total viewers.
Okey, macam mana ni? Saya punya yang orange ni, ni dia kena square juga pelik
Alamak, record session nak habis dah. Tak sempat nak buat. Okay, try lah buat. Tadi link tadi ada kan? So, boleh buat. Ini bukan discussion lah lepas tu.
Yang dalam, kita tak tahulah dia orang tak buat.
I think ada grup tu dia ramai, ada grup yang kosong tak ada orang, macam tu lah. Dia masuk semua satu grup dalam. So dia nampak jemput tu ada yang kosong, ada tak ada apa-apa kan. So
dia orang tak pergilah ni, dia orang tak masuk bilik tu.
Ya betul, ada yang tak masuk.
Sebab tu Dr. Khairul, kalau kita nak buat dengan student, kita memang kena invite dia melalui email supaya dia tak boleh masuk kumpulan lain. Dia akan hanya
I
masuk
see.
pada
Yes.
kumpulan yang kita ada assign sahaja.
I see.
Macam
Ya,
sekarang
betul.
kita tadi open tau. Maknanya kita cuma based on faculty je kan. Maknanya the participant will have a choice untuk nak masuk ke tidak. Kalau dia tak nak masuk frame ni, dia boleh masuk frame yang satu lagi. Tapi kalau kita
Baik-baik.
invite dia through email, maknanya dia hanya akan masuk kepada frame yang kita telah assign sahaja.
Ya, betul-betul. Okay, tak apa. I think this is our, kita boleh katakan first experience lah menggunakan breakout session. But the staff are still learning. Perhaps later on in the future, in the second series maybe, bila kita we akan kata pecah lagi kepada yang ni lah. Mungkin kena ada moderator lah. Based on some feedback, dia kata kalau kita tak leave macam dia orang, tak ada moderator.
Tapi kalau nak dia lebih efektif, kita kena limitkan participant. Kita tak boleh ramai sangat.
Okay, tak apa.
Kita limitkan kata 60 and then kita ada 4 flexi lah.
Okay.
4 flexi.
Okay, because tadi ada feedback kata yang ada juga yang cakap seorang tapi yang lain kadang yang tak ada mic, dia je dengar je yang macam-macam ada feel ni lah. Anyway,
it depends on the device yang dia ada lah. Tapi kalau yang masuk kalau yang dia orang ni masuk guna handphone kan, jadi kalau dia orang nak buat aktiviti ni macam dia boleh bercakap je lah sebab dia nak access Jamboard pakai handphone dia tu macam susah sikit lah kan.
Betul, definitely.
Dia boleh access tapi dia nak macam dia nak respond ke apa tu macam difficult lah sebab handphone kan dia ni tak ada stylus ke tak ada apa kan, jadi difficult for them to. Cuma dia boleh ni je lah, dia boleh join the conversation, dia boleh join the discussion.
Dr. Ryudaria, tadi saya masuk ke grup FKE yang grup pertama tu, yang Jamboard pertama tu kan, saya tak access any of the editing tu. Maksudnya saya tak boleh.
I think doktor masuk yang tu, yang the first link yang Mitra bagi tu, you have to masuk link yang kedua sebab dia memang the first link yang dia bagi tu dia tak allow editing.
Okay. But maknanya for the first discussion tu kita cuma discussion lah macam tu.
Tak, you have to link tu ada dekat chat.
Ada. Saya dah save tadi sebelum keluar. So dah ada yang link untuk yang activity 1 and 2 tu kan. Activity 2 tu saya boleh edit dalam tu. Cumanya activity 1 tadi saya nampak macam ada group lain dia ada conteng-conteng. Cumanya saya macam tak boleh conteng pun.
So that means you have used the first link lah. You tak guna link yang kedua tu. You kena guna link yang kedua yang Mitra bagi. Baru boleh edit. Sebab tadi dia
saya baru refresh balik dan boleh edit sekarang. Cuba tengok sebab tadi ada participant yang inform to me that boleh view saja dan saya dah buat.
Okay. Right now baru boleh. Okay. Tadi memang saya tekan-tekan tak keluar apa-apa. Kita discuss saja. Kena check je.
I think kita kena close Mitra the breakout room. Sebab time is already running really fast.
Okay, Mitra boleh close the session. We come back to our main session.
Minta dia orang balik ke main room.
Okay.
Actually Jamboard tu dia orang boleh save. Dia orang kalau nak buat later boleh. They can still have access to it.
Semua dah balik ke main room dah sekarang.
Okay, alright. So Dr. Ida, over to you untuk continue.
Sekejap. Dia orang tak masuk lagi ni. Dia akan ambil masa 1 minit untuk dia orang masuk ke main room. Walaupun dia already left the breakout, tapi untuk dia masuk dalam main room tak akan ambil masa.
I see. Okay,
Dr. Yuda, dia automatically.
Dia automatic Okay, so right, so everybody is in the session balik di right. Ini saya berada dalam breakout ke ataupun dalam ni Mitra?
Dr. Yuda dah memang dalam main room. Jangan confuse dengan Jamboard punya frame dengan breakout session.
Itulah sebab sekarang ni terbuka yang breakout ni.
Yang ni Jamboard.
Yelah sekarang ni dekat Jamboard ni kan. Sekejap. Saya dah terkeluar ke? Stop sharing. Sekejap. Stop. Okay. Right. So kita buka pada satu soalan lah kot. Satu respond from the group. Anybody would like to share before kita break for 5 minutes? Just to get some response from you. Open to anyone. Okay, on this one here, tadi kita ada, I think ada satu frame kot yang ni. Okay. Mitra, can you show yang penuh ni punya tu? Yang ada sticky note, yang ada penuh, jawapan yang penuh. Okay, 1 match to D, 2 match to C and D, that's inaccurate. Boleh bagi lagi frame yang lain yang ada jawapan yang lengkap, yang all the 4 answers. Yang ni. Okay, so 1 match to D, right? 2 match to C, okay. 3 match to B, and 4 match to A. Okay, so this is actually the correct answer. Okay, now let's look at the second one, the second question. The second question tu, can we get some response from you? Mungkin tak ada, tadi saya tengok tak ada yang dah sampai ke the last column. So maybe you have some query to post. Yang ni. Ni sampai sini aja. Tak sampai ke sini. Sampai the last column. Actually the last column is the most important one, because that's actually the one that tells you about your marking scheme basically. Okay, kalau tak ada rubrik pun, at least you have a marking scheme. Okay, so kalau tengok kat sini kan, this one demonstrate. Stop kat sini kejap, Mitra. Let me see this. So explain basic concept. Students should be able to demonstrate the understanding of computer graphics. Student can come up with good, moderate or weak. Okay. Masih lagi je very general. When you say project can come out with good or moderate, weak, what is it that you're looking at? Okay, think about when the students submit the project, okay, whether it's in the form of a report or whether they have to perform. Okay, because demonstrate here, you use demonstrate, so it can be perform, it can also be cognitive. Okay, so katalah kalau ini adalah cognitive, okay, cognitive, and then you are using project, okay, as your assessment method. Now, when the students submit the project, what is it that you are looking for in order for them to get the marks? So basically itu yang kita kena isi dekat the last column ni. Okay, so kalau kita kata through the project whether students can come out with good, moderate or weak, kalau kita beritahu student macam tu pun, if you tell the students, okay, you must come out with good, moderate or weak, student pun tak faham kan. Okay, I'm sure student will also not understand what is it that you want from them. What do you mean by good? What do you mean by moderate? What do you mean by weak? So you have to be more specific. Okay, so that is what it should be. That is what it should be here in the last column, because this last column will inform you of the rubric or the marking scheme that you want to prepare for this particular outcome. Okay, so I hope everyone is clear. Right, so since so I'm going to, kalau tak ada soalan, if there's no question,
there's one more maybe that you want to comment mungkin, this one.
Which one?
One more ni yang apply.
Yeah, apply. Okay, apply knowledge learned to solve given problem as a collective of theories and rules to solve them. Okay, again, this is rather general. Okay, So you have to be more specific. When you say a collection of theories and rules, how is it that you want students to present the theories and the rules? Okay. Will organization or the format matters to you? Okay. So use theories rules to solve problems kan. When we say that's your expectation, okay, what is it? Expectation ni pun mungkin boleh diperjelaskan lagi lah. You can actually elaborate more on that for you to put in the last column. Okay. Use theories rules and laws. Okay. Whether in terms of you want to see the accuracy, okay, you want to see whether the choice of methods, okay, the choice of methods is actually one of the criteria for the marking, okay, and also the manipulation, okay, the working will you consider working, okay, ataupun if students do not show the working but just using the some kind of graphical device, they can get the answer, okay? But no working. Will you consider giving marks to just the answer? Say the answer is correct. Okay? So are you going to penalize the students? So, or would you say working is very important and you want the student to show the working? Then if that's so, then you have to say it here very clearly. That means the application must include working and answer, and both must be correct, something like that. Okay, so then then it's clear. And when you say application, okay, you are actually looking at the methods. Okay, maybe you are also looking at the facts. You're also looking at the reasoning. You may be also looking at the manipulation, the computation, okay, and and also the answer. Maybe whether the answer is right or wrong, okay, or maybe the answer may be right but the method is wrong. Okay, so all that must be, okay, if possible, you make it explicit to the students. Okay. Right. I think that's all.
Can I have one question? Dr.
Yeah.
Idaria, just now you mentioned that we don't have to share the rubric at the early stage. We probably share our expectation. So when is the right time that we can share the rubric with students? For example, project or task-based.
When we give the task. Normally when we give the task, then we share the rubric as well. Okay. But this one, the success criteria should be in the planning, at the planning stage, at the beginning of the semester. So when you show your learning outcomes, okay, when you show your table of specification, okay, your planning table, so there's already at the end that highlight your expectation. Okay, what is it, okay, that students need to do in order to tell you that the outcomes is achieved. So it doesn't have to be very wordy. It can just be you are looking for, like I mentioned just now, like explain, you're just looking for clarity, maybe looking for terms that you're going to use that when you prepare the marking scheme. Okay, so these are how you assign the marks. This is how the marks will be given. Okay. So for example, you give say a computational question, okay, that involve calculation. Okay. So you are going to look at the maybe the choice of method. Okay. So you are looking at the reasoning. You're going to look at the algebraic manipulation, and you're going to look at the answer. Okay. So you're going to look at these 4 things. So you just put that at the, because your CLO says calculate. Okay. Calculate something using whatever method. Okay. So what does calculate entails? What constitute calculation? So you can say that the calculation must involve working and answer. Okay. So it doesn't have to be very specific, not yet, because the specific too will be in the rubric or in the marking scheme. Okay. So at this stage is just the attributes or the performance expectation. Okay. Just to inform the students, this is what they have to do. Okay. This is what they need to show to you or demonstrate to you that tells you they have achieved the outcomes.
Okay, clear. Thanks. Clear.
So I'm going to pass to Dr. Hairul. So we're going to take 5 minutes break before we move on to session 2.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Idaria. Really interesting. So we are going to take about 5 minutes break. tea break or toilet break, whatever you want to call it. So, but before that, we are going to just to show you a 3 minutes video of a stretching, basically. So based on some observations from some participants, I mean, it's very important for all of you, for all of us. We have been sitting here for almost like 1 hour and a half. 1 hour and a half kan. So I think it's better to do a little bit of stretching lah. So I have found that one is a very simple 3-minute video. If you can go ahead and follow the stretching, I hope it will be very beneficial to you lah. Okay, and then after that, for the rest of 2-3 minutes, you can go and have a coffee break and we come back for 5 minutes. Okay, please do so.
We often get asked which exercises are best to do at your desk. So I'm going to run you through a simple routine to do throughout your working day.
Okay, thank you very much everyone for your participation. I hope that everyone feel a little bit relieved. Okay, so we're gonna continue our break for another 2 minutes and then Dr. Ujara will continue for the next session. Okay.
Okay, so welcome back everyone. Hopefully everybody is refreshed. Manage to get yourself a cup of coffee. Right. So we're going to continue with the second session. This is what I'm going to introduce to you because we are focusing on the cognitive domain. So we're going to use Bloom taxonomy, specifically the revised Bloom taxonomy, because the revised version is much more useful or more informative compared to the old Bloom. And hopefully you can use this taxonomy to construct written test items at the appropriate level. So for tests and exams, we're just focusing on assessing knowledge or the cognitive domain. Okay, so we're going to start off with an activity. So again, you're going to use the Mentimeter. So go to menti.com, okay, put in the code 81086914 and try to think about what makes a good question. Okay, from your perspective, what makes or what you consider is a good question. Okay, so can you go to menti.com, put in the code 81086914. Okay, Mitra, can you share the menti.com? What makes a good question? Okay, so far we have 2 participants. So we have a countdown, yeah? It's just 1 minute for you to think about the response to this answer, to this question. Okay, so 12 participants so far. So we have about less than a minute and 30 seconds, less than 30 seconds. So 14, 15. Okay, so we managed only to have less than 20 people. Yep, 20 participants to answer this question. So let's have a look at the response. What makes a good question? Okay, right. So I think all the answers given are fairly good. Okay. High order thinking, clear and reliable. It measures the outcomes. It's valid and reliable. Okay. Okay. Clear taxonomy. It's not vague or ambiguous. Okay. So basically what constitutes a good question is it should assess what you want to achieve. Okay. So basically it should assess the learning outcomes. So it must also serve the purpose. I think some of you managed to give a fairly good answer. It covers the LO, open-ended answers, and so on. Okay, right. So now we're going to stop sharing. So we're going to continue with the session on the revised Bloom taxonomy. Yeah. So as what mentioned here, exam questions should test a range of knowledge and skills at the appropriate level. Okay, and should test critical appreciation and the ability to apply rather than just the passive reproduction of memorized facts. Okay. So remember the constructive alignment that we have at the very beginning when we design our course. So constructive alignment is the key to creating effective assignment and exams. Okay, so assignments here refers to all the other methods that you use like projects or presentations besides the written examination. Okay, now just to emphasize more on the constructive alignment, now remember that to students, assessment is what is the most important thing in the curriculum, or in the course. Now you can see that the teacher perspective and student perspective here does not meet. So we have to ensure that when we create the assessment, it must mirror the learning outcome, as indicated by the red arrow. The red arrow is actually showing that the task, the assessment task, must indicate or represent what is worth learning, as perceived by the students. Because to student, exams signal to them what is worth learning in the course. So to ensure that happens, to ensure that both the teacher and student perspective meets, you have to make sure that the assessment task that you create represents the learning outcomes as shown by or as perceived by the students. Then, according to BICS, the teaching activities and learning activities are both directed towards the same goal. And hence, the constructive alignment takes place. So these are some guiding questions of when you want to create the test items. First, you have to ask yourself, what is it that you want to test? How much emphasis on each outcome? What type of questions? How much time do you have? How to prepare the students? And whether you want to create your own questions or just take it from the book. So as I mentioned just now, undergraduates or students study with an eye towards the exams. So it is up to us as an instructor to reinforce the aims of the course by constructing questions that require the kind of thinking that we had indicate in the learning outcome. Okay, so the test item should assess the achievement of learning outcomes. This is what we say what constitute a good question. It must assess the outcomes. It measure the important aspects of the course that we had emphasized in the course, and it must also reflect the content that we emphasize and the appropriate level. Whether it's actually at the level of analysis or evaluate, the higher order thinking as specified in the outcomes. And the levels of difficulty must also vary. So again, the basis of exam questions is the learning outcomes. And we use Bloom to clarify what we want students to learn, also tie the concepts to the level of question that we want to ask. So these are the criteria for quality tests. So these are some of the things that we have to consider when we want to create the exams. In terms of the complexity, the quality, the meaningfulness, the language. So you have to make sure that it's clear and students is appropriate to the students, and it's fair and also reliable. So let's look at the revised Bloom taxonomy. As I mentioned just now, the RBT is much more informative because it constitutes of two dimensions, not just the cognitive processes, but it also make explicit the knowledge dimension. The kind of knowledge that we want students to learn. In terms of the factual, the conceptual, procedural, as well as the metacognitive. So it describes the type of thinking that learners need to interact with the information during the activity or when they deal with the types of knowledge. Right, so this is how it looks like. So we have the cognitive process on the upper row and the knowledge on the left column. So we have all those in the cell. So remember facts, understand facts. So you can move from the cell to cell, and you can see that when it comes to the higher order, so for learners or students to analyze, evaluate, and create, they need to actually make use of all the different types of knowledge, not just one specific knowledge. When you analyze, you must use the facts, the concepts, the procedure, and perhaps the metacognitive knowledge. So this is how it looks like in more detail. So it shows not just the hierarchy in the RBT, the revised Bloom taxonomy. There are not levels of types of thinking, but rather the complexity among different types of thinking. Why they shift or they switch between evaluating and creating? Because for evaluating, the kind of thinking involved is critical thinking. But for creating, it involves creative thinking, so which is much higher in terms of critical thinking. So those are some of the verbs that you can use. This is just as a guide. It does not mean that you must use these verbs, because you as an expert of the discipline or the knowledge, you know better. But this is just to give for a beginner, it's good to use this verb as a guide when you want to create the items. Okay, so what does factual or conceptual, procedural, or metacognitive knowledge is explained here. So factual is just referring to the terminology, to the definition. Okay, so just the basic elements about the subject matter. Conceptual are the ideas, the principles, the theories, okay, the models, and so on. Okay, and procedural is referring to the techniques or the procedures, the algorithm, okay, how to do something related to the subject matter. And metacognitive is, in layman terms, it means thinking about thinking. So it refers to knowledge of cognition. How do you know, okay, that something is true or something is right? Okay, the awareness of our own way of thinking. Maybe we know a strategy like styles of learning. Our preference is more for the global rather than sequential. Okay, so all those are actually referring to the metacognitive kind of knowledge. So actually it's the more of the effective, because it's referring to the interpersonal skills or the self-efficacy that we have. Okay, this is how it moves from concrete to the abstract. So factual is actually more concrete, and then as you go along to conceptual, procedural, and the metacognitive, it becomes more abstract. Okay, so these are the kinds of knowledge that can be tested. So are you going to test the factual knowledge? Are you going to test the conceptual, the procedural, or the metacognitive knowledge? Okay, so just very quickly, so this one is in Menti also. If you want to try out what you know about Bloom taxonomy, so given these two questions, can you identify the level? You can use either one. If you are not, if you are more familiar with the old Bloom, you can also use the old Bloom. Okay, but if you want to try out your knowledge on the new Bloom, okay, because this is just asking on the cognitive level. Okay, so can you go to menti.com, put in the code 15163105, okay, and try and test your knowledge on Bloom based on the question given. What do you think is the level? Is it at remembering, understanding, and applying, analyzing, evaluating? Or creating? Okay, so only 30 seconds. Only 5 participants. Kena increase the time Kak Mitra. Given two opposing theories, design an experiment to compare them. Okay, so let's look at the response. Right. Understand, analyze, create. Okay. Actually, if you read carefully the question, okay, it says compare them. That is actually the thing that you want students to do. Okay, so design as experiment is not the actual. Okay, it's not the actual action that you going to assess. It's actually compare them. So when you say compare, it's actually making evaluation. So the 5% who managed to answer that, okay, that is actually the correct answer. Is evaluate. Okay, so if you don't want to be confused, then better not use the word design. Okay, because design can give the connotation that it is at the highest level, which is create. Okay, which the 23% of you have understood it in that way. Okay, so the next question. Write short notes on COVID-19 virus. Okay, so more people have the chance to respond to this particular question. Okay, so some of you say remember, understand, evaluate, create. Okay, so we have 13. The others, if you want to try, there's still many of you have not make an effort to attempt this question, only 34. Okay, so 46% managed to get it right. It's at the second level. It's understand. Okay, now this is just looking at the cognitive level. What do you think will be the knowledge dimension for this question? Remember, we want to use the RBT, the revised Bloom taxonomy. So you have two dimensions. You have the cognitive, you have the knowledge. Now for cognitive, this is at level 2, understand. What do you think would be the knowledge? Okay, so keep that question in mind because we are going to look at the RBT table. Okay, Mitra, stop sharing. So I'm going to share the PowerPoint. Kenapa tak appear? Can you see the PowerPoint?
No, not see. No.
Kenapa dia tak appear? What's happening?
Dr. Vida, you share your desktop or you share the kalau share desktop nanti can see your desktop lah. Kalau share the software maybe dia tertutup agaknya. We can try again.
Okay, sekejap. The RBT. Why is it not appearing? Somehow the problem. Boleh share tu ke from the slides that I give you? I'm not sure what's happening. This is session 2.
Session 2. Dr. Mitra.
Yeah, session 2. Mitra boleh juga share kalau if you want. Okay. Dah keluar kan?
Belum lagi doktor, belum lagi.
Kenapa tak keluar? Mitra dah stop sharing kan?
Dah.
Mitra dah. I'm not sure why. because tadi masa you share your Mentimeter, I have not stopped sharing my slides. So maybe because of that, I don't know. Ke ataupun Dr. Khairul boleh share slide from your part?
Okay,
From,
sebentar ya. Sebentar kejap.
sebab memang tak dapat daripada sini. I'm not sure what is happening.
Ya. Sebentar saya kejap. Slide number 1 ke number 2? Yang number 2.
Session 2. Dia ada tulis session 2. Session 2. Nama dia.
Yang the first slide tu nama session 2 ya. Sebentar slide. Slide number 2.
Nama file dia tu session 2.
Baik. Saya share saya punya screen ya. Okay, boleh nampak
Okay.
Ni ialah session 1, sorry. Second file is session 3. The third file is session 2, isn't it? This one?
Bukan. This is session 1 punya slide. This one, session 2 punya slide. This is the one, yeah.
Okay, baik.
Okay, so Dr. Khairul kena control the slides lah. Because nanti saya dah tak boleh control kan. Okay. Alright, so next slide.
Kejap sebentar, saya go back to.
Okay, so we are now moving to, I think, the slide number 5. Yang ni tadi kita dah buat kan. Lepas tu we also have go to Mentimeter again for the level. So the next slide. Lagi, next slide. Okay, we have done this. So the next slide. Okay. Done. We have done this. I think we have almost covered more than half. Okay. Ini pun dah. Kita dah. Okay. Sampai the next slide that shows the Mentimeter. Okay. Alright. So we have done this just now. Okay. So actually if tunjuk balik yang tadi. The question on Mentimeter. Okay, so question 1, we have identified that the level is actually, the cognitive level is evaluate. Okay, but if we want to match it with the knowledge, this is actually conceptual. Okay. Design experiment to compare them. So this is procedural knowledge. Okay, because you expect the learner to carry out some steps. You know, when they want to do an experiment, there's some procedure or technique that they have to use, right? So this is, in terms of the knowledge, it is procedural, and the cognitive level is evaluate. Now, for question 2, write short notes on COVID-19 virus. So the cognitive level just now is understanding, which is level 2, but in terms of the knowledge, it is conceptual. Okay. Okay, next. Right, so when we create test items, we have to consolidate all the basic knowledge, and then we must include the high cognitive skills, the problem solving skills, as well as the written communication skills. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we're going to look at the taxonomy table, which comprise of the 2 dimensions. So we have the cognitive dimension and the knowledge dimension. So it can be used for a number of purposes. Okay? It can assist you with the creation of questions. So you can know clearly the type of knowledge and as well as the cognitive levels or the cognitive development. Okay? And it also provides us with a sort of like a classification system, okay, where we know the distribution of the question. So you can actually categorize the question from low level to high level, as well as the type of knowledge involved. And it assists us with the construction of question papers because it helps us to check the balance and also the complexity of the question that we had created. Okay, and we can also use the taxonomy table to analyze the question papers. Okay, so we can examine the types of knowledge that we are testing, as well as the cognitive skills that we are assessing. Okay, and it helps us to it gives us an information about the coverage and complexity of the questions in the paper. Okay, next. So you can see that the table is very useful where it helps in the visual representation of the alignment. Okay, so you can see the how the three aspects, the outcomes, the assessment, and instructional activities, okay, is placed, okay, in the cells. So once we know that, in fact, you can use the learning outcomes. You can use the learning outcomes and place it in the cell. Okay, for outcomes that are in cognitive dimension. Okay. Then it will inform us, okay, that we have to create questions that will constitute this type of knowledge and the level of thinking that we want to know. Okay, next. Okay, so it can be our blueprint. Okay, so it's an example. So if you have, say, the outcomes of the question that you want to create, so this table will give you the coverage or the distribution of the questions. So you have some low questions there, some high order questions, and also in terms of the knowledge coverage. So you have the factual knowledge, you have the conceptual knowledge, procedural, as well as the metacognitive knowledge. Okay, so we are going to go to the Jamboard for the next activity. Kalau tunjuk the next slide, there is just some information, I think, on how to prepare students. Okay, so before you assess them, you have to make sure that they have the knowledge as well as the skill, because otherwise you are not doing justice to the questions. Okay, so the purpose is not to create tricky questions or some question that is not familiar to the students. Okay, nor does we say that this is going to be like rote practice, the same question will appear again in the exam. No, this is just preparing the students in terms of having the knowledge as well as the skills, okay, the intellectual skills, because this is the one that we're going to assess. Okay, so according to Felder and Brand, the only way people acquire the skills and knowledge is through practice and feedback. That's why we need to have the formative kind of feedback. Right, so the next activity that we're going to do, again, we're going to use the Jamboard. This is the activity. So you're given these sets of questions. Now, what you're going to do is to map these questions, okay, using the taxonomy table. Okay, map the questions on the cell. Okay, so you have 5 questions there. Identify the level, the cognitive level, as well as the type of knowledge. Okay, and then use the taxonomy table. Okay. Boleh tunjuk ya, Dr. Khairul, the taxonomy table.
Taxonomy table. Which table tadi?
The next slide.
Yes. Okay, bye-bye.
So there are actually 2 questions that you have to do in the Jamboard. One is the questions that I have given you, the one that I prepare. And the second is using your own examination questions. Okay, use your own examination questions that you have. Okay? If you can assess your past year paper and try to use the taxonomy table and see whether the coverage, okay, in terms of the balance, okay, are you just concentrating on particular aspect, or is it balanced in terms of the complexity? Okay, so Mitra, we are going to use the same Jamboard. Are you going to use the same link?
Okay,
So
Dr.
again,
I have shared the
are we
link.
going to limit the Jamboard to about 10 minutes?
Yes, maybe just 10 minutes good, because time is really not on our side.
Yeah.
So just 10 minutes. Perhaps if the second activity is not possible to do it today, maybe you can do it at home on your own. Okay, because this is just considering your own examination question and try to use the taxonomy table to place the questions. So we are just focusing on the questions that I have given, the 5 questions.
Okay. So maksudnya sekarang we are going to redo again the breakout session ya, masa tu?
Yeah, just go back to the original kan, Mitra. Is it the same link that you have placed here on the chat?
Oh, it's a different link.
Different link. So can you paste the link?
Dah, I dah.
Okay, itu activity 3. So we are going to do activity 3. Yeah? So activity 4, we're going to skip that. You can do that on your own. So we are just going to do activity 3.
Okay, to all participants, can you please go to your back to your breakout session again in the same group? All right. So and then we come back around about 5 to 10 minutes, Becca. And then Dr. Mit.
Just I think
okay,
10 minutes in the breakout room, I think is enough because there's only 5 questions.
Okay, baik.
Hello all. Hello. Are you there? Guys. Nak tutup dah. Okay lah. Anyway, I just enter. So, so I think you guys can actually save this activity 3 and 4, and then maybe later on you can go through the documents, okay? Because we only have a few minutes, a few seconds left before we leave the breakout session, right?
Session 1
That's right.
Okay.
So you have to go up.
Session 2 punya. Okay. So
Ini session 1 sebelum, just before session 2 punya tu. There's one slide in session 1. Penghujung sekali at the bottom. Towards the end. Ni.
This one? Is it this one?
This one yang ada gambar Einstein tu.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah. Second last. This one. Yeah, just tu ni lah Okay, everyone will come back. Okay, Dr. Khairul, the next slide. Okay.
Next slide before this one.
After this one. Okay, so just to remind you again, yang kita kata, does every learning outcome have to be assessed? Kalau in theory, yes, but in practice, no. Okay, because sometimes, as Einstein says, not everything that counts can be measured, not everything that can be measured counts. Okay, so mungkin maksud saya situ, what I meant here is that learning outcomes have to be assessed too in terms of summative. Okay, because we still have to assess, but it can be in formative manner. That means there's no grades. Okay, because normally formative assessment, there's no grades. Okay,
Okay, Dr. Yuda. Hello.
Okay. Right.
Okay, Dr. Yuda. Continue.
Slide 34 in session 1. That's actually the example.
Okay, saya share balik sekali lagi. Slide 34. This one here.
Slide 34, yes. This is the example for the activity that some of you may ask just now, don't know what to do. Okay, so this activity actually analyzing your outcomes to extract the information about the criteria. Okay, because remember that outcomes plays a very important role in terms of the learning, in terms of the teaching, as well as the assessment. Okay, what is it that you want to assess? What is it that you want to prepare the students? How do you want to prepare the students, as well as what do you want students to learn? Okay, it's all being informed by the learning outcomes. Okay, so that's why when we write our learning outcomes, Okay, try not to write your learning outcomes based on topics. Okay, so it should be actually based on the whether it's a cognitive, psychomotor, or the affective domain. Okay, it should be on the skills, the knowledge, and the ability that you want students to achieve at the end of your course. Okay, so not based on the topics, because when it's done based on the topics, that's when you want to do or create the criteria, it becomes very difficult. Okay, because that is only meant for the topics. Okay, whereas when we look at the success criteria, we are talking about the three domains being aligned or integrated together. It's just that when we want to do the assessment, maybe we want to assess one domain at a time. Okay, but in terms of the learning, okay, all the three domains are actually interrelated. We cannot really actually isolate, okay, them or compartmentalize them in silos to say that, oh, now we are doing cognition, we are now doing psychomotor or affective respectively. Okay, it is all integrated. It's just when we want to assess, we have to make some kind of inference. Okay, so that's why the choice of methods is very important. Okay, it depends on your intention, your expectation. So that's what you have to make it clear. So the last column, okay, to be successful, students need to do. That's the one that we need to communicate with the students. Okay, what you want them to demonstrate to you, to show or to give you the evidence that the outcomes have been achieved. Okay, so I hope that is clear. So actually the example is here. We have already given the example for two types of outcomes. For the explain and illustrate. So I think we need to move on to the next session. Dr. Khairul, yang session, okay, for session 2, just very brief. I'm going to give some feedback. Okay, what I have managed to just now go through in the Jamboard. So we're going to move right to the end of the slides. Okay, the activity that you do just now, okay, just a very quick feedback. So the previous slide. Okay, so just to give you or to check whether you had get it right. So define a computer base. So that should be when it's actually a definition. So the knowledge there is factual, and in terms of the cognitive is just remembering. Okay, so this is just it should be in cell 1, okay, of the taxonomy. So explain 3 characteristics of a computer base. Okay. So that should be explained. That means it can be in level 2 or it can be in level 4, depending level 5, I think, depending on the complexity of the questions. Okay, but for this case, just explain 3 characteristics. So it should, I would assume that it will fall in the cognitive level will be in level 2, and the knowledge is conceptual. Okay. So relate each of these characteristics to a database package with which you are familiar. So when you are talking about relation, making connection, so that should be the cognitive will be analysis, okay, analyze. So that will be level 4, and the knowledge, okay, will be conceptual. Okay, because this is just talking about characteristics, okay, of a database package. Okay. So question 4, compare the database. Okay. So this, in terms of the cognitive level, that would be when you compare, that will require making some kind of evaluation. So that would be level 5. And again, the types of knowledge is conceptual. Okay. To those of a general, dedicated. Okay. Right. And suggest criteria. So that would be level 6. Yes, when you suggest something that will be new ideas or new concepts to the learner, it may be not new to you, but to the learner is something new. Then that will be level 6. Okay. Decide whether to use or spreadsheet package. So there's some kind of techniques or algorithm that's required there. So there will be procedural, okay, and the level of cognitive will be level 6. Okay. So I hope that will be clear. Okay. So you can try for the next slide shows, the activity for you to try on your own. Use your recent examination question and decide the kind of knowledge you feel that would test and the cognitive skills assess. Okay, so we have, I think, roughly about half an hour, Dr. Khairul, for the last session, which is on creating the test items. Okay, so I'm going to make it very quick, okay, because this basically you are going to do all the creation. Okay, but before you can create, I would like to share. So for the purpose of saving time, you're going to just jump straight to the, I think, slide number 5. Okay, slide number 5, which is the the characteristic of effective exam. So remember that we want the question that we create to be valid, reliable, recognizable, and realistic. Okay, so the next slide, please. The next slide. Okay. So what makes a test good or bad? Okay. Of course, the obvious answer to that is if it serves the purpose, okay, then it is good. Okay. So in terms of whether our question is good or bad is actually depending on the purpose. Okay? If it serves the purpose, then if it meets our expectation, then it's considered a good question. Now recap again the RBT. So these are the revised Bloom taxonomy. We have the 2 dimensions there, okay? And the types of questions. Right. So the next one. So you can have various type of questions. Okay. So this is in terms of the because when you see the revised Bloom taxonomy, there are 4 dimensions. 4 categories to the knowledge dimension. So sometimes for simplicity, you may only want to think about whether it's declarative or functioning. Okay, so declarative is just the factual and the conceptual. Okay, and the functioning is the procedural and the metacognitive. So if you want to think it in that term, but if you can use the 4 categories that is given in RBT, it'd be actually more useful. Yes. So the next slide. Okay. So this is a checklist on constructing test items. Okay. First, okay, as I mentioned just now, the learning outcomes actually is the guiding. Okay, that guide us, that pinpoint to us in terms of the methods, the criteria. Okay, in terms of the teaching learning activities that we want to expose students to. Okay, it's all actually guided by the learning outcomes. Okay, and the test item must also relate to what was actually taught. Okay, so if the learning outcomes already guide us in terms of preparing the students, then there should not be any a surprise to the students. Okay, because if we want students to be able to evaluate or to analyze, we have to make sure that the students are prepared or have that ability. Because otherwise, it's not fair for the students when all you do is just focusing on understanding, focusing on just memorizing. But when it comes to the exam questions or the test items, you are actually assessing the evaluation and analysis. But there is no preparation or done in class for them to build for them to acquire the ability. Okay? So that is actually bad practice. Now, do the test item measure important concepts rather than trivia? Okay, so it depends again on the level of your outcomes. So if your level of outcomes is very high, then you should go for the highest level that is indicated by the outcomes. Okay, and you have to make sure that it also measure the practical applications rather than simply measuring recall or understanding of basic principles. And of course, the last is, okay, you have to make sure that the questions is clearly written. Okay, there's no ambiguity, okay, no irrelevant information or unintentional clues to the correct answer. Okay. Right, so the next slide. Okay, so again, you can use this as the test blueprint in terms of the creating the items. Okay, so if already plan to create, say, questions that will fall in the application and procedural. Okay, so that give you the idea, then you have to concentrate or try to create question in that particular set. Okay. Right, so then the next slide, Dr. Khairul. Okay, so the goal is to discover what students know and can do and not to create tricky questions. So I think that is a very clear quote that tells us the purpose of the assessment is to measure the learning outcomes. Right, so there are several formats and types of questions that we can think of or we can decide on in terms of the creating of the test items. Okay, so the next will give you the list. The next slide will give you the list of all the different formats of or types of questions. Okay, the next slide, Dr. Khairul. Okay, so it can be objective questions, it can be short answer questions, it can be a graphical hotspots. So graphical hotspots is actually using some kind of software where the learner had just need to use a tracker to place or to choose the correct answer. Okay, so it can be in the form of essay, scenario-based, performance test, take-home or open book exam. I have actually included a link there for a YouTube in which Prof. Khairia have given a webinar on how to create open book exams. Okay, so if you're interested, you can go to the YouTube and watch the presentation. Okay, so the other form of question is what we call GOMBETs and audit outcomes. Okay, so there is no single best type of exam question. The important thing is that the question must reflect your learning outcomes. So we're going to look at some of these questions. So there are some examples given in the following slides. Okay, so I think we can move quickly to the through the example. So this is the matching type. Okay, that what it did just now with the learning outcomes and assessment. So that's matching type. You just match, column A with column B. Then the next one, next example is objective. Okay, so if you want to create multiple choice question, so there is a stem and then you have the distractors and the key. Okay, so there's an example given there, simple example. And of course, MCQ or the objective type of question, there are actually many variation. So the next slide shows you all the different types of MCQ. So you have the correct answer variety, the best answer variety, the multiple response variety. Okay, so the next slide, Dr. Khairul. Okay, so the incomplete statement variety, negative variety, okay, and substitution variety, incomplete variety, combined response variety, and so on. So those are all actually the different variation in the objective type of questions. So the next example is the what we call the hotspot questions. Okay, so sometimes this type of question maybe can be used in this our online learning. Okay, the paper based is you can actually translate that into a hotspot version. So this is actually using some kind of a software they call the iSpring quiz maker. Okay, where in this case the student just need to drag the tracker and place it on the position or on the area that indicate the correct answer. Okay. So this is one way if you want, like now we have this plagiarism and cheating being very widely spread. Okay, one way that you can actually use to assess your students online. Right. So the next question is the open response or the open-ended type of questions. Okay, so I give you some example here. Okay, so open response sometimes maybe in terms of construction it's not that difficult, but in terms of marking, okay, if you don't have the criteria or you don't have the marking scheme, okay, then it will be quite tough, okay, in terms of the marking. But this actually is a very good type of question in the sense that there are so many possible answers, so plagiarism or cheating can be avoided. So the next question is also an example of open response. So this is an essay type of question. Okay. All right, so the next question is GOBET. So what do you mean by GOBET? GOBET is actually where you present a passage or an image or some kind of an artifact as the scenario or the basis of the questions. Okay, then you can ask whatever question you like related to the image. Okay, so again, this is actually one format that you can use to create higher order questions. So the next slide shows you an example of a go back. Okay, boleh tunjuk go back? Next slide. Okay, so this is an example of a go back. So you gave this picture, image. Okay, the problem posed is you are required to design a simple beam. Now, of course, in final exam, you don't expect students to design, okay, to do. This is a psychomotor type of question. Okay, so, but you want to assess the knowledge. Okay? So you can actually create this question by using an image. Okay, and what you want is the information on how to accomplish the task. Okay, so it will enable you to address the higher order question, higher order cognitive ability. So in this case is the analysis. Okay, so the next is also an example of a go back. Okay, so this is where this is come from my own course where I took an image from a magazine. Okay, and see that rather than just asking the students to find the domain and range, okay, now this is relating to the real situation, the real phenomena. So given them a graph or a table of values or even given them an equation. So we ask them, how do they know that this is a function? Okay, and you can see from, some other questions that related, okay, to the concept of a function. So based on the student's answer, you can see where the idiosyncrasy or the misconception, okay, and then we can address that. Okay, so you can do this type of question first as teaching learning activity, okay, because it's not fair for if you give this in the exam, for example, the student will get a shock if they don't have an experience of building or developing the ability or the skills to analyze or to evaluate something. Okay. Not necessarily you're going to choose to pose exactly the same question. What is important is to prepare them for the outcome. When you say that analyze, what does it mean? What do you want the students to do? So you can either create the task that is similar to the what is being done in the class as a task item, but maybe in a much more simpler version. Okay. So this is just an example of a go back. So the next one is a scenario based problem. Okay, ordered outcomes. So what does ordered outcomes mean? Ordered outcomes mean you have one question as the stem, okay, and then you have 4, 5 items or maybe just 2 items as which is of different level. Okay, different level of complexity. Maybe the first question is of level 2 and the next question is of level 4. Okay, so that's what it meant by ordered outcomes, and you can use the solo taxonomy as a guide in constructing the question in terms of how you want to discriminate, okay, the level of complexity. Okay, so if we're going to look more on the solo taxonomy later in the next workshop. But here, the next slide shows you how does that solo taxonomy looks like. It's similar to the Bloom taxonomy. It's just that Bloom taxonomy is used to create questions. Solo taxonomy is used to evaluate the quality of students' responses. Okay, so pre-structural means they give an answer, give a response, but it's incorrect. Okay, and you can see as it moves towards the high end. Extended abstract means they are able to make the connection. So they are able to create or able to evaluate. Okay, so the similarity with the solo taxonomy is there. Okay, it's just that this is used to make judgment on the quality of the students' responses. Okay, so there's another example on the ordered outcomes. The next, example of ordered outcomes. So you can see that the given a table, so they are given table of values, for example, so that's going to be the stem for the question. And part 1 is just simply asking them to determine the area, which is low level, okay, compared to the part 2, okay, is actually a higher level. So when you do audit outcomes, it gives students the chance from say weak students, okay, they can do actually part 1, for example, but they will not be able to do part 2. Okay. So in a way, these audit outcomes will help you to discriminate between good students and weak students. Okay, so you give the weak students a sense of success. Because if they are able to answer part of the question, they can have a very good feeling about themselves. Okay, rather than getting 0 for the entire questions. Okay, so audit outcomes actually helps you to discriminate between the students' level of understanding. So the next slide is also showing you an example of audit outcomes. Okay, so this is from my own course. So you can see that part 1, part 2 is simply just calculation. Okay, and part 3, 4 is a higher level. So this will tell me whether, if they can do part 3, so that means it's above average students, and part 4 is good students. Okay, the next question I think is another example of, this is an example of scenario based. Okay, so you set a scenario and from there you create the questions. So you have part 1, part 2, part 3. Okay, so the next example is I think some recommendations from Felder. Okay, you will get the slide. So jadi sebab kita nak try to save time. Right, so the next slide, Dr. Khairul. Okay, so this is what Felder proposed or recommended. Okay, so if you want to include higher order questions, okay, and you know that the time is limited, for example, in the final exam, so you can actually omit the complexity of calculation because that is actually the time consuming. But by just asking the students to write down the equations or to write down the methods, okay, and explain, okay, or circle the variable for which you would solve or the set of variables if several equations must be solved simultaneously. So if they can write the equations, okay, and given sufficient time, they could actually go through the detailed calculations. So this is actually a generic problem that you can use, okay, rather than asking the full working of the full calculation. You can just ask for them to explain or to just write the equations and, okay, identify the parameters. Okay, so the next question is an example of a performance test item. Okay, so this is you can use this as a teaching and learning activity. Or if you have the outcome as psychomotor, so this is one way of, this is not effective, okay, because at the end you ask the student to write a short reflection of the work. So this is effective domain, okay, type of questions. Right, so we have roughly about 10 minutes or 15 minutes to create the questions. So the next slide is the wheel where you can use the verbs. Okay, this is the old bloom. Okay, and the next slide is the new bloom. Okay. These are the verbs that you can use to create test items. Okay, so we have, I think, about, we can give them about 15 minutes, Dr. Khairul, for them to do the worksheet. Okay, so try to create, this one, maybe you can do this on your own, but I would like you to do the worksheet, okay, within the time that we have now. Okay, this one here. Slide number 33. Right. So this is the activity that you're going to do. Okay, but this one is just focusing on the cognitive. Okay, so after you had create these questions, so you may want to map it on the taxonomy table and see in which knowledge dimension does the question falls. Okay, so again, we're going to move to Jamboard. Mitra, is this on Jamboard?
Yes, it's in the Jamboard. I have shared the link for activity 5. Do you want to make the breakout session as well or just the Jamboard link?
just the Jamboard link. Okay, so
Yeah,
you can go
I have
to
shared.
so you can go to the Jamboard. If you want to use you can retrieve the worksheet from the Jamboard. And you can paste it in your computer if you like. You can use it to create the questions. Okay, so maybe we give 10 minutes for the activity. Boleh, Dr. Khairul? So the link is given in chat, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is trying your the knowledge that you have gained so far in the last two sessions and 3 sessions on creating taxonomy. Okay, masih ramai lagi ada dekat dalam mainframe.
Sebab kita tak buka breakout session. Nak buka breakout session juga ke?
Buka je lah kalau dia orang nak masuk.
Okay.
Tak semua akan masuk dalam ni lah, dalam frame yang ni.
Dia masuk breakout session tak semestinya dia masuk Jamboard, dan dia masuk Jamboard tak semestinya dia masuk breakout session.
Okay, so sekarang ni kita nak dia masuk dalam Jamboard lah.
Tapi since Dr. Yuda suruh buka breakout, saya dah buka breakout session jugalah.
Kalau mana yang nak pergi breakout lah, breakout session tu. Kalau tidak kalau semuanya dalam frame ni, takut nanti sebab ada seorang dah yang letak tu jawapan dia. Okay, try as many question as you can. Okay. Kalau tak dapat complete semua pun tak apa. But then if you plan to join the workshop on the part 2 of the course on construction and evaluation of questions, test items, so we're going to pick up again on this, the question that you had created. There's 16 plus people in the breakout room. Yeah. So Dr. Khairul, nanti nak ada Q&A ke at the end?
Okay, sure. Okay, sorry. Basically, we are now around 4:53. So I think, can we pick up this activity, or maybe because I think there's a lot of information here that can be used for the staff. And then also the slide notes we also share for them to be used as reference lah. So maybe we can have another 5 minutes. Maybe Dr. Yudaria can wrap up. Maybe you can have your conclusion nanti, and you can continue with Q&A.
Okay.
Okay. So I can unshare my, or you want to, Dr. Mitra want to cover? Saya stop sharing. Do you want to show any slides tak? Furthermore, ada slide kita nak show.
At the end, patutnya ada satu slide on reflection.
Is it? No, it's not this one.
Tapi tak ada kat sini. Reflection tu.
This one? Evaluation.
This one, yang 1 minute evaluation. Dengan
Okay,
yang
baik,
ni,
this one.
the last. Yang apa tu? Yang test can have flaws.
Okay, so is this a Mentimeter type question ke macam mana?
Yang ni is just for them to reflect on their own.
Okay, so maybe we can use this question also to get feedback from the participant in the chat box, or either maybe, okay, I think we can open a Q&A right now. Is it okay, Dr. Vida?
Boleh kalau if
Okay,
they have.
Okay, so to all participants now, I think this session is almost over. So right now, I think we would like to welcome any questions or any inquiry to ask Dr. Yuda, and maybe a more further explanation on how to use some of the building test item method or techniques that we have covered through this session. There are a lot, basically. So anyone can welcome. You can unmute your mic, or you can write down in the chat box. We have approximately around 5 minutes. Please, everyone. Yeah, there's a question there. Can you please say your name and ask your question, please? Hello, tadi saya dengar ada satu lagi. Hello, can you please unmute your mic? Maybe I stop sharing.
Okay.
Okay. Please, everyone, if you have any further question to ask to Dr. Yuda, any specific question or general question, let's take a look in the chat box. I think there's no question so far. So anybody? All right. So maybe I ask one question at Yuda. So what basically to summarize all that we have covered today, what would be your best advice to probably a young lecturer or maybe a senior lecturer also on what are the most important things that you need to keep in mind while building a test item that that must be, because right now we are in the middle of week 4 of our semester, and I think most of the lecturers are preparing final exam questions. So what do you think that from your experience and what you want to highlight for today is the most important key items that you want to bring today from this session?
Okay, as you've seen from the Miller's pyramid, okay, so exam is just one way of getting the evidence, okay, that the outcomes has been achieved. Okay. So we have to make sure that whatever method that we chose, either is in written form or whether it's in performance test item, because test item can also be assessed using performance, okay, not necessarily all the time written form, okay, especially if you are looking for the what students can do, okay, with the knowledge that they have, which you cannot capture through written type of assessment. Then you have to resort to the alternative assessment. That's why now we are, the future ready curriculum is emphasizing on the use of alternative assessment. So you cannot just use the traditional assessment, okay, because it will not be accurate in capturing what actually your students can do. Okay. Because in the end, we are accountable. Okay, this is just my advice, because we are accountable in giving the grades to the students. When you say that, when you award the students a A, that means you are saying that they have all the skills, they have the knowledge, and they have the abilities or the mindset that is appropriate for the discipline. Okay, because we are the one who is actually giving the course. Okay, so we are actually responsible. Okay, when we say that, okay, the student is outstanding, the student is excellent. Okay, and when the student go into the workplace, okay, the future employer also agree with you. Okay, that when you give a student A, okay, they also agree that this is an A student to their perspective. Okay, because their perspective is that they want all the three, okay, the three domains, okay, the three domains all to be integrated, okay, not just happening in silos. Because as a human being, we don't function that way. We function, okay, with how we behave, how we the beliefs that we have are all how we behave, okay, the behavior, okay, tingkah laku yang kita tunjukkan, the behavior that we show is actually influenced by the knowledge that we have and also by the mindset or the habits of mind. Okay, so it's very strongly interrelated. Okay, it's just that when we assess our students, we focus one thing at a time. Okay, because if you want to assess all three at the same time, it will be very complicated. Okay, so that's just for simplicity. Okay, so the tendency is that we are going to assess our students one domain at a time. Okay, and that will require different methods. So you cannot use the same method to assess all three domains. The features or the characteristics is different. Okay, so for this workshop, the focus is on written test items. So basically, it is only focusing on the cognitive knowledge. Okay. So if you like for the other psychomotor and affective, then you have to resort to the alternative type of assessment. That maybe require Dr. Naziha because she's the expert to talk about alternative assessment. Okay. So I hope whatever we had shared today with you, okay, doesn't remain at the declarative knowledge. Okay, hopefully it become a functioning knowledge for you. Okay, something that you can also apply in your own area or in your own course. Okay, I think that's wraps up.
Okay, baik. So Adi, okay, so Dr. Mitra and also myself has put up two links. I have already put in the chat box a very short, quick survey form of this course. And then also Dr. Mitra also have a very quick Menti reflection question with the code number there in the chat box. So after the session, can you please take some time for very quickly to answer this very short survey? So with that, great, Alhamdulillah, thank you very much. I think it's time to wrap up. It's 5:01 p.m. already. So we appreciate, really thank you very much. Really appreciate Dr. Idaria for being here with us. And it's been a very informative, it's quite intense also. All the stuff is very, very interesting. I hope that the lecture can, all the academic staff here will make use of it. InsyaAllah, ilmu yang berguna itulah ilmu yang terbaik. InsyaAllah kan. So boleh gunakan. InsyaAllah kami akan share all the slides. Although maybe Dr. Idaria tak dalam masa yang pendek ni 3 jam mungkin tak boleh nak explain every single thing of the building test option in written part. But insyaAllah maybe that will become your trigger in order to explore more on. She just provides a lot of options macam mana kita nak buat building test item. But insyaAllah if we can go further, I think insyaAllah we will have our second series later on. So on the 20th of April, we are going to continue with our second part of this series. On construction and evaluation of building test item, and I hope that all of you could also participate that. So can you
the rubrics on the scheme, and once this is this session is only concentrating on the construction of the test item. Okay, so the second part of the workshop will be looking at on the evaluation. Okay, so once you have created the item, so how would you grade or mark your students' work?
Okay, baik. So Alhamdulillah. So basically that we are almost come to the end. Dan if we are welcome maybe one or two last question from the audience, from the participant. There's about 106 participants today. A very good crowd here. But I hope that all of you can benefit lah, insyaAllah. So any one last question to ask Dr. Yuda? Or maybe it's time to go home right now and I really cannot wait to go home. So Alhamdulillah. So thank you very much again, Dr. Yuda, as well as Puan Mitra, Mama Adi, and also good luck for your PhD, insyaAllah. I heard that you are still in the struggling. So thank you very much again, Dr. Yudaria, and we will see you again. So kita You can feel free to comment or feedback in the comment in the link given to you in the reflection by Menti and.
My last note is that don't forget the reflection, because the reflection is asking the most important thing that you have learned and also what remains unclear. Maybe I will pick up again on the what remains unclear in the next workshop.
Okay, very good. Okay, so those are things that maybe ada blur lagi ke yang thing during this session today. Maybe can highlight that in the reflection as well as the Microsoft Office form. I will share with you, Dr. Yuda, with the Microsoft Office form later on if there's any feedback. Okay, all right. So Alhamdulillah, terima kasih semua. We'll see you again insyaAllah. So stay tuned for our second part of the CD seminar, and thank you for all the good participation